Alrighty guys, welcome back to another one. We had someone request us to do a video with TSS 18 density in 2 3/4 inch 12 gauge, but a little bit lighter of a shell. We've done one before, but it was 1.5 ounces. He wanted something along the lines of 1.125 or 1.25 ounces. He's a little bit older, says his shoulder can't really take a beating like that anymore. Well, here you go. This is a 1 1/4 ounce assembly of TSS number 9s, moving about 1200 FPS. This is not a published assembly. It's moving about 1200 FPS. This is only 1.25 ounces. However, with TSS number 9s, the pattern density is still very, very good. And if you didn't know, TSS is tungsten shot. It has a density of about 18 grams per cubic centimeter, whereas lead is about 11 to 11.3. There's the grandfather clock again, always wanting to interrupt me. But anyway, TSS is a lot more dense than lead is. It is very, very heavy. A TSS number 9 pellet has about the same ballistics as, I think it was a number 4 lead pellet, number 4 or 5, pretty sure it's 4, with better penetration and velocity retention. So basically, TSS has allowed shotguns, small as 28 gauge and 410, to outperform 2 3/4, 3 inch, and even some 3.5 inch 12 gauge shells. The 10 gauge, well, you can go up to 3 ounces of lead in it, but still TSS number 9s can outperform number 4 lead. So you have these small little shotgun gauges, again 28, 410, that can outperform the bigger gauges, 12 and 10, but at the cost of being really, really expensive. TSS is, well, it costs about an arm and a leg, whereas lead is still very cheap, relatively. So yeah, with TSS, you're getting insane performance over lead at a significantly higher cost. But guys, the components we're using today is just this stuff right here. Oh, the number of the day is 26. We're using a brand new primed 2 3/4 inch Shadot hull with that stuff already in it. The wad I'm using is the TPS wad trimmed down to 43 millimeters. These do actually come in 43 millimeter length. This is the 2 3/4. Again, it's trimmed down. If you want to fold crimp with a TPS wad in 2 3/4 inch 12 gauge anyway, you need the 43 millimeter version, not the 2 3/4 inch version. Anyway, this is, well, finish out the components first. A 1/2 inch 20 gauge fiber cushion wad and a 1/4 inch 20 gauge felt wad. The felt wad goes on top, underneath the pellets, on top of the fiber cushion. Felt stands up way better to tungsten pellets than fiber cushion does. The tungsten pellets will tear right through that guy right there, but the felt offers a lot more resistance, so felt on top. Anyway, this is 1 1/4 ounces of TSS number 9s. You'll see it is about halfway up the length of this wad. Now, this is number 4 lead. You'll notice the volume difference. The 1 1/4 ounces of lead number 4s takes up almost the entire length of this 43 millimeter TPS wad. So, the density on the TSS is again far greater than it is lead, takes up way, way less room. With the right powders, you can get some insanely heavy TSS assemblies. For example, in 2 3/4 inch 12 gauge, the heaviest I have seen with TSS, 3.5 inch 12 gauge, is 2 3/4 ounces of TSS. That is extremely heavy. That is equivalent to what a modern 4 gauge would be capable of, or an 8 gauge, I should say. But in 10 gauge, the highest I've seen is 3 ounces, although capacity is a lot more than 3 ounces of TSS. Anyway, let's move on from this. We've done listed off the components. Let's actually get to building one of these now. So once again, we're using this stuff right here. And again, the number of the day is 26. Also, again, this is not a published assembly. The velocity is about 1200. So, where'd my hull go? There it is. We already have the stuff inside there. You know what I'm talking about. TPS wad, we do need to trim this. We need Gary Caskey's 4-pedal adjustable wad slitter. Brain went blank there for a second. This is what his wad slitter looks like. It is adjustable. It'll do 10, 12, and 16 gauge and a few 20 gauge wads. you just turn this brass dial back here to raise or lower the blades. I'll show you that right after I slit this wad, but it's 4 pedals and I have it set to do a 4 pedal slit or a 3/4 slit on those pedals. You just push down. You can see we have 4 even pedals and a 3/4 cut on the wad, which is exactly what I like. Now, when I said adjustable, this brass dial down here, you tighten it or loosen it, and that controls the depth of your slit. Like, I'll give this a few turns, and you'll notice this should be a lot more, the blade should be a lot lower on the shaft, see? Let's go even more with it. You can do a full cut, like cut all the way to the bottom of the wad with this, or you can do a half cut, 2/3, 3/4, 7/8, 3/8, whatever you want. A good experimenting tool here. Setting this back to my preferred 3/4 cut. But if you guys want any of Gary's tools, facebook.com/gary.d.caskey, C-A-S-K-E-Y. I also use his wad tampers every single day. In fact, I'm getting ready to use this. So, once we have our wad slit, go ahead and set it down in there, and you can see it is at the right height to fold this. There you go. Wad ends right here. Good amount of clearance. And next, we need this, the 20 gauge 1/2 inch fiber cushion wad. Get that started. Use Gary's nudger, I call it a tamper, to seat that. And there you go. On top of that, we need our 1/4 inch felt. This one is pretty simple. We're not using a mylar wrap, nothing like that. We are using buffer though. Now we have stack height appropriate for a 1 1/4 ounce assembly of TSS number 9s. Now you could obviously switch out to 8s or 7.5s and take that waterfowl hunting if you want to, but this one is more in the vein of turkey. But anyway, where's our shot at? I seem to have lost it. Oh, it's in the 16 gauge shell here. 1 1/4 ounces of TSS 9. Give that a shake and you'll notice all of it is inside the wad. Now we just need a little bit of buffer, overshot card, and fold crimp. And for the buffer, I am using mix number 47. It's one of my favorites, but I still do prefer the BSB/ITX buffer. Anyway, we're using 1 level scoop of a Lee 2.2 cc dipper. And then, let me grab my vibrating massager here. This was sent to us by a viewer. I love this thing. Just vibrate that down on in. Once the buffer is flush with the top row of pellets, then it's ready for an overshot card and crimp. With these small pellets like these 9s here, the buffer does take a few seconds to settle in. This thing makes it so much faster than just tamping it in by hand. But it is flush with the top row right there. As you can see, every pellet is contained within the wad. We are ready for an overshot card and again, fold crimp. One thing I like to do whenever I'm putting together TSS is take a wad tamper and compress that all down in there to make sure every pellet is inside that wad, because as I mentioned earlier, TSS is a lot more dense than lead, and with the density comes really, really hard pellets. Far harder than steel. It will mar your barrel up if you miss a few inside the from being inside the shot cup. So you really want to make sure all of your TSS pellets are inside the shot cup. This one is. I'm just taking extra precautions because I like my guns. I don't want my bore scratched up. Although some people say that tungsten pellets don't really mess with that much at all, I still want to take a little bit of extra precautions. But anyway, for an overshot card, I'm just using a really thin section of a 12 gauge Maxi Nitro card. Set that right on top, and we're going with a 6-point crimp on this. Nothing really complicated here at all, guys. 6-point crimp. We're going to use the Rebasator. Did its job really well that time. It didn't fully close it up. But now we're just ready for a fold. Going to give that a little bit more of a nudge with the Rebasator. It was kind of uneven on one side. It's because I'm standing at the press sideways. Can't pull even pressure on it. But you can see it is almost fully closed up now. The Rebasator isn't really meant to close up your shells. It's meant to create a lip around the center of it to make a perfectly even, deeper set crimp when you final crimp it. But guys, that's going to look great. This is my 10 gauge press, so it's not going to give the shell any kind of taper whatsoever, I'll have to do that with a GOT BN2. I have this press over here set up in 20 gauge because we are working on some 20 gauge stuff. I didn't feel like switching out to the 12 when I have a BN2. Anyway, let's close this up all the way now. And this is what it looks like. It has absolutely no taper. It is completely straight. Yes, this is a 10 gauge press, but you can still do 12 gauge on it. The crimp is absolutely flawless, however. It looks like a factory shell. Looks better than a lot of factory shells, but let's hit this with a GOT BN2 crimp finisher now, and this will look beautiful. I'll close the video out. And here's the end result. You can see a flawless crimp on it. Perfectly even all the way across the top, no waviness. Pretty decent taper on it, although it is kind of impossible to see on these clear hulls. That's one thing I do not like about the clear hulls, but everything else looks beautiful. 1 1/4 ounces of number 9 TSS, great for turkeys. Really big fan of that crimp. The Rubasator and the BN2 combo, beautiful. Can't beat it. So a few people have been asking us to measure the overall length of the shell that we show here. This being 2 3/4 inch, I wouldn't really think it would matter in a modern 3-inch chamber gun or 3.5. But this one is 2.2845. I hope you can make that out. Yeah, 2.2845, so a little bit more than 2 1/4 inches crimped. It was 2 3/4, actually 2.7324. I think it was before folding it, not quite a full 2 3/4. They almost never are. But what I was getting at there is I don't think overall length of a 2 3/4 inch shell matters in a modern 3-inch or 3.5 inch gun. If it'll cycle 3-inch, it should obviously cycle any length of 2 3/4, and yes, it can vary up to 1/10 of an inch. For example, actually, where did it go? This 2 3/4 inch Remington here it's a 16 gauge, but the box says 2 3/4, the shell says 2 3/4. However, it's actually 2 9/16. It measures 2.6 inches. So, even though it says 2 3/4 inch, it's not. It can vary that much. I tell you what, guys, this 1 1/4 ounce assembly of TSS number 9s here, it looks like it's actually about a 3/4 ounce shell here. There is so little shot column, it's laughable. It looks like such a light assembly, but it's not. Anyway, guys, I think that's going to end this one here. I've pretty much covered everything I've wanted to cover. Once again, this is not a published recipe. It's not tested, although going off past experience and things we've done before, this should be right about 1200 FPS and about 10,000 PSI. But again, it's not published anywhere, it's not been pressure tested, it's just me going off past experience and what I know and going off existing data. This should be about 1200 and 10,000 PSI. But please like and subscribe, we always appreciate that. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below and we'll get back to you. And if you want to, go check out our Patreon. It's as low as $1 a month, and every penny we get goes right back into the channel. And you guys get early access to content. A link to that, as well as a link to our Instagram, Rumble, and merch store will be in the description below. But other than that, you guys take it easy. We'll see you in the next one.